Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Dan, and this is October 3rd, 2018. So, as promised, this is the third video for the month discussing a horror movie, going over the kill count and the review and just all the cool things about the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street series, all mashed together as one because of the eventual crossover film, Freddy vs. Jason. Okay? Now, the next film on the list, chronologically, as far as what I was told online when I looked, is Friday the 13th, Part 2. Okay? And Friday the 13th, Part 2 is the very first Friday the 13th film that features Jason Voorhees as the killer, the guy in the hockey mask who we see through just about every other film in the series. Sorry about that, the phone slipped a bit. Now, in this one, however, he is not wearing the hockey mask that he is most commonly associated with, but he is in fact wearing a burlap sack over his head with a one eye hole cut into it. Looks very similar to what Joseph Merrick, played by John Hurt, wore in the old Elephant Man film that was done by David Lynch. Now, it's a pretty interesting outfit. It's a pretty good idea, and it's just like, other than that, he's just wearing like a general like basic plaid shirt and some pants. Nothing real fancy. It's not a huge budget that we're working with here for this movie, clearly. But the main plot of the movie, the very beginning, it's set 5 years after the original Friday the 13th. Jason's mother is dead, and Adrienne King's character, who was the survivor, the final girl from the original film, who killed Jason's mother, beheaded her with a machete, she's decided to just kind of like, go off and live alone like some kind of hermit or something. She's at her house, her apartment, whatever the case may be. She's talking on the phone with her mother, walking around the apartment, just saying that she has to deal with things in her own way, which means just kind of like getting away from everybody and sort of, trying to calm down still from the experience that she had had, because undoubtedly being chased around by a murderer, watching, all of your friends dead, more than likely that's going to cause you a bit of post-traumatic stress disorder. Trust me. So she's walking around her apartment talking on the phone, and eventually she puts the phone down, hangs it up, and she goes to take a shower. She gets out of the shower, hears some noises, I guess, and just kind of starts looking around her house. And of course there is one point where there is a cat scare, where a cat jumps in through a window and she freaks out. But then she wonders why the window was open in the first place, shuts it, goes over to get something out of her fridge, opens it up, there's Mrs. Voorhees' head right there in the refrigerator. She freaks out, of course, and then suddenly all we see is just ice pick right into the side of her head, which would be a near impossible feat, I would say, because that's, your skull is your one of your hardest, thickest bones in your body, and you're not shoving an ice pick through that very easily. But Jason Voorhees is, of course, a severely mentally handicapped mongoloid, and has that I don't know my own strength kind of thing, where he just doesn't hold back like a lot of mentally handicapped people tend to do. That's not a diss on them. It's just it's a thing that happens. It's not controllable. I understand. Not a big deal. Well, he ends up, taking off out of there and going back to Crystal Lake, where he grew up. It's the place that he's familiar with, and it's the place that he has been living for the last 10 years or so on his own, just out in the middle of the woods, because, as it turns out, when he supposedly drowned, he didn't actually drown. His mother was apparently just an idiot, didn't pay attention, didn't realize that he hadn't drowned. They never found any kind of body or anything. But despite all of this, she just decides, okay, well, my son drowned. I'm going to get revenge. I'm going to kill a bunch of people. I'm going to make sure that this place never opens back up again. I don't know, whatever. So she ends up, Adrienne King is dead. Uh, Pamela Voorhees is dead. This is Jason we're talking about here. I don't know why I said she. He ends up going back to the woods around where the original campground was. Well, on the other side of the lake, there is like a camp counselor training sort of camp thing. It's not actually geared towards kids. It's just like, these people get training and they learn to be, better mentors and various things like that. And there's a guy who is facilitating all of that, taking care of it, and trying to, help these people be better adults. There's something like 15 of them. I didn't actually get an exact count. But of course, they go back there, and Jason, just kind of like, patrolling his general area around the lake where he lives and everything, ends up running into some of these folks. And of course, ends up slaughtering the lot of them. It was insane. This film, actually, I specifically remember when I was a young kid, very young, back in the 1980s, having seen snippets of this movie. But at the time, I didn't know what it was, and I just remember that it scared me half to death, and I had nightmares about this guy walking around with this, burlap sack over his head, the one eye looking out, and just slaughtering people. And there were things that even today, as I was watching it, I specifically recalled having seen back when I was a small child. There's one point, one of the folks that is at this camp is a guy who's, in a wheelchair. He's paralyzed from the waist down. And so he's at one point rolling around on the wheelchair out on the front deck of this, big house that they're all staying in. And he goes to, like he's sort of in front of these steps that lead way down to, the lake, down this, hill. And Jason just shoves this huge blade right into the guy's face, just right across here. You see like the close-up of it going in, and then you just see his wheelchair like, falling down the steps behind him. And I specifically remember that wheelchair with the guy in it with the, blade through his face, falling down the steps from when I was a little kid. I specifically recall the burlap sack from when I was a little kid, just all of this stuff. And there's one more thing that as I was watching, I remembered having seen, and that was eventually that the gal whose name escapes me, the character and the actress, unfortunately, she's running through the woods trying to get away from Jason, who has attacked her. She believes everybody is dead. And for the most part, they are. But there's one guy named Paul who had been choked out by Jason and left for dead, but is not actually dead. She's just not aware of this yet. And she goes and finds this shack in the woods that we had seen earlier in the film. We actually saw the sheriff of the town chasing Jason through the woods, and then he goes into this shack. It looks like it's just like, built out of, random stuff that was found. But he goes in there and he just opens this door and says, "Oh my God," and then just Jason shows up behind him, shoves a hammer through the back of his head. That's it. We don't actually see what it was. Later on, when the final girl makes it to this cabin in the woods, she of course ends up finding, when she opens the door, not only the corpse of the sheriff, but also the corpse of the girl who had been killed in the beginning, Adrienne King's character, the corpse of one of her friends, some other corpse that was just like totally, decomposed down to bones. I'm not sure who that was. And Jason's mother's head, decapitated head, sitting on a table, sort of like a shrine with all sorts of candles around it and everything, and the blue sweater that Jason's mother was wearing in the original film is kind of draped over the table in front of her. Just very eerie, creepy scene. It's like he just worships his mother, but then again, being a mongoloid, being mentally handicapped severely, apparently it's very likely that his mother was really the only person that he spoke with very often. She was his entire world. So naturally, I guess now that she's dead, he would continue to worship her in that way. So the final girl hurries up and puts the sweater on, which is just kind of gross, I don't know, but she puts the sweater on. Jason barges in. She starts saying, "No, Jason, stop. You're all done. They're all gone. Mommy's very proud of you." And she just starts acting like his mother would. And he sort of calms down and chills out and gets down on his knees in front of her to accept his reward from her. And she raises up this machete, and unfortunately, just as she raises it up, she moves. You can see Jason's mother's head right behind her. He notices this. He flips out, gets back up, and, bull rushes her. Paul, the male character who was left for dead previously, barges in and starts tackling him and trying to off him. And last thing, she ends up just shoving this machete deep into Jason's side. I mean, we're talking, it must come down like, to about here or so, at least. Just right into the side of his neck and down into his chest, through his clavicle. I mean, it's bad. And eventually her and Paul both leave, go back to, the small cabin that she was staying in, to gather her things. They're going to gather his things. They're just going to get out of there. They're going to report everything to the police, all that stuff. And she's standing in front of a door. Or no, she's standing in front of a window. Paul is standing in front of a door. They hear a noise outside. Paul goes to the door. He's, ready to take out whoever's there. And it's the dog of one of the other characters that vanished in, much earlier on in the film. We were led to believe that it was dead, but it turns out it wasn't. I'm not sure what the deal is with that. I guess just another, basically a cat scare, but with a dog. And when that happens, they're all like, "Oh, okay, tension relieved, everything's all fine." But then, much like the original film, Jason just comes crashing through the window and grabs her and starts pulling her out. She wakes up. She's getting brought onto a stretcher. Oh, and Jason's face is fully exposed at this point too. He's got long scraggly hair. He's got a messed up scraggly beard. He's just this oddly shaped bulging head with an eye that's way down here and another eye that's in the normal place. And it's bizarre looking. But she wakes up on a stretcher, and she's being brought into an ambulance. She asks where Paul is. Nobody says anything, but the thing is, nobody specifically says that he's dead either. So while we can't rule out the possibility that he is dead, it can't officially be added to the kill count. So as of this film, that's where that ends. But Jason's still out there somewhere. As of this film, Jason Voorhees has 9 confirmed kills, as opposed to Freddy Krueger's confirmed kills from last video of 24. So right now, Freddy's most definitely in the lead, but all that could change very quickly in the blink of an eye when it comes to either one of these characters. And the next film that I'm going to be covering tomorrow, the 4th, is Friday the 13th, Part 3. So Jason's got another chance here to be able to turn it around and get in the lead. Folks, I'd like to thank you very much for sitting with me for these past 15 minutes here. If you enjoyed watching this video, go ahead and like and subscribe, and go ahead and hit that notification bell down below so that you can see future content and get notifications. And if you would like to, go ahead and leave a comment. Just tell me what you think. Tell me how I'm doing. Tell me anything that you'd like to see. I plan on doing current films too, but right now I want to get through a bunch of classic horror films for the month of October. I'm going to be doing one every single day, folks, so I will see you tomorrow for Friday the 13th, Part 3D. Thanks, guys.